was supposed to go to Samoa and be on alert for Apollo 10.
Oh, yeah.
But then the crash happened, and there was no way I was going to do that.
Yeah, because didn't they station you guys kind of all along the anticipated landing area of the...
Yeah, the deal with the Apollo program was that when these capsules come back to Earth, they're usually able to just insert them right where they want to be, real close to the aircraft carrier, or the Navy guys are going to get in a helicopter and they're going to put the flotation collar around them so they won't sink and get the astronauts out.
Yeah.
So we had training for it, and I don't know if Paul was there in the training, but we did, and we practiced out in the ocean outside of Subic Bay. They had a mock space capsule. It was stood 16 feet off the water, and it was huge. And here's the deal. What would happen is that if the space capsule was coming back from space, it would hit the top of the atmosphere, it would skip and go hundreds of miles off course and not even be close to the carrier. And that was the opportunity for the Air Force to get involved with it. So there would always be a 130, and like you say, there were 130s around the world.
All along, yeah.
Yeah, and they had and they each covered a figure-8 pattern. Depending on where the capsule was coming in.
Yeah.
And so the capsule could skip along and then end up somewhere that they didn't plan for. And then the capsule would land, and because of the fact that a Mercury capsule had sunk early in the programs, and they weren't sure whether Gus Grissom had inadvertently opened up the capsule door or whatever. So, but they don't, it could have been something else. He had opened it up, and it took about a year and a half for them to recover the capsule.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Because it was so deep?
Yeah.
Or they just didn't know exactly where it was?
Well, it just took to locate it and everything. They had to, it took them a while anyway, but they eventually recovered it. And so the whole idea was that so we would take the Navy ship would carry the mock capsule out somewhere, miles offshore, and drop it. Now the fake capsule stood 16 feet off the water. And the thing is that it would act almost like a sailboat. If the wind was up, that thing could move along.
Wow.
So the idea was to stop it and to put the flotation collar around it on it. And so on the bottom of the capsule was a hook. So what would happen is the pilot would fly over and he would drop smokes and sea dye marker. And then you could fly back over it and see which direction it was going. If it was blowing or the current was taking it or something, you'd see where the sea dye marker was stretching out or where the smokes were blowing around, you know where it was. So if it was blowing in this direction, then the 130 pilot would take the 130 and cross in front of it. And before it crossed in front of it, he'd drop. The first thing that would go off the ramp would be the 20-man life raft, and that was attached to floating line, and that would be attached finally to the flotation collar, and they would go down with their drogue chutes, slowing their descent, and they'd get into the water, and then the floating line would be floating, and hopefully the capsule would drift over it and catch it on the hook.
Oh.
And those drogue chutes would be like sea anchors. You know, they'd stop its forward motion, and then the PJs we'd have to jump master and do our chutes and stuff, and then you jump in, and the first thing you do is you'd go right to the flotation collar, and then you'd swim to the flotation collar, and you'd bring the flotation collar back to the capsule, and you'd open up the flotation collar, and there was a couple of bungee cords, and you'd get them up and around the bottom of the capsule, and then you'd run these rings, which were attached to the bladder all the way around the capsule, and then there was a 60-pound CO2 cartridge, and you'd pull that, and it would fill up the rings, and then the flotation collar would keep the capsule from sinking, and you could get up on top of the flotation collar.
Yeah, it was like a big
go around
raft.
and stuff, and
Yeah.
even though we could never get the astronauts out. Only they could open the door from the inside.
Oh,
But we'd be ready to put them in the 20-man life raft, and then get them on board a ship or something.
Yeah.
And so
I think he did go up to Subic once to do that training. I
Yeah.
remember him talking about being up there doing that. Yeah,
yeah, and it was.
he thought that was cool. He really wanted to do that.
Yeah, we one of the things that California had sent some NASA guys out to train us up, and they were telling you about things. They would give you warnings. They say on these capsules, they'd say you have to be careful. If you see, because sometimes there would be fluid that would be like it would burn, so you would always have to wear your rubber gloves. So you wouldn't put a bare hand on some of this stuff that could burn it really bad.
Oh, yeah.
And beyond that, sometimes there would be antenna that hadn't deployed in space, but that could inadvertently be explosively deployed and take your head off. So if you look and you see it, yeah. So you got to walk very carefully around those things.
Yeah.
But then the guy did something which really caught me by surprise. Here's this NASA employee, and he said, you know what people always ask what the astronauts are like. Well, you know what they're like. They're hotshot fighter pilots, and they've got, and they've got big egos and everything, and they're very competitive and all this stuff. And he says, but actually, there's one astronaut, he said, that was not liked by anybody, right down to the lowest janitor at NASA
Really?
and everything. It was Alan Shepard.
No kidding.
He said, that guy is such a jerk. And I've read about the astronauts, and I read about him when he finally found out that he was never going to go to the moon, or walk on the moon or anything, and they moved him into an administrative position. He had tantrums. He was the first millionaire astronaut because they hung around him, the Bush family, the beer people.
Yeah.
And they gave him all of the distributor rights for their beer in Texas. And
Wow.
He made millions.
Oh my God, I guess he did.
And then there was, I was telling that anecdote to a friend of mine who was had a chief of compensation for GNC in Pittsburgh, and she said, she told me, she said, Jim, she says, my first job out of college, I was 22 years old, and she said I was working in Washington, D.C., and she said my boss, a woman, took me out for my 22nd birthday, and she said she was Alan Shepard's mistress. And so they went out to dinner, and Alan Shepard, she said, anything that my boss or I said, he was not interested in. Anything that he said obviously had to be treated like nuggets of eternal wisdom, So she said, yeah. And then a friend of mine who's a retired U.S. air pilot told me that when he was going for his annual flight physical, it was near where I live in Bethel Park, and he said, I went to the office and I saw a framed picture of a whole bunch of guys in Air Force uniforms, and the guy said that after his internship, he went in the Air Force and he became a flight surgeon. He became associated with the astronaut program, and so my friend went over to the picture and he said, look at these, and he recognized some of the astronauts and stuff, and the guy And his doctor came over and put his finger on Alan Shepard's face and said, that guy was the biggest a-hole, whatever.
So it was unanimous.
It was, yeah, and I thought, wow, what a thing to tell a bunch of strangers, a bunch of grunts,
Wow.
PJs.
Boy, he must have been bad.
He must have been. Anyway, when he died, I was watching the Today Show, and I forget, Matt Lauer or somebody had another astronaut on, and they were talking about him. And so Matt asked him something about him, and he said, he says, the astronauts were very competitive. And he said, so they could be really difficult. He says, even though there's a level of teamwork you need,
Yeah.
sometimes, we get on each other's nerves and everything. And he says, because we're all competitive. And he says, I would have to say that Alan was probably the most competitive of all of us. And I thought, well, that's a nice way of saying
He's an ass.
he's a jerk. Yeah,
Fourth, 1969, and there was a ship, a Japanese freighter that was called Shoka Maru, and I forget what company it was with, but it was shipping lumber cargo from where was it? I think from Japan to Cambodia or something like that, and it hit really bad weather, like typhoon kind of weather, and the lumber cargo, which was like telephone pole size pieces of lumber, listed, and the ship went over on the and it was in like 30, 40, 50 foot swells, and it went over about 35 degrees. And start sending out maydays. And under international maritime law, any ship that receives a mayday must respond. And so there were ships within 100 miles or so, and they responded and they headed on up. Now, at Clark, at the 31st Rescue Unit that we were in, they were aware of it too, so they launched a 130 that night, and there were some other, and I think there was a Taiwanese C-46 that joined the search, and there was a Navy P-3 Orion airplane, that has a little stinger out the back. That's like an anti-submarine warfare plane, and they're used to flying low, and and now. Back in those days, the radio frequencies on even the search and rescue 130s weren't the same as on ships. So we could never radio a ship back then. So if we were searching and trying to help guide ships to survivors, they would have to do something like drop a smoke or something like that near what they saw. Now, this ship eventually went all the way over, and all 23 crewmen went in the water. And I think that the initial ships came by, and 860 was the crew that went out that night. That was Dick Crowley and Len Murray.
Oh, yeah.
And they weren't able to do anything, but the engineer on 860 would have been able to drop those smokes or flares or whatever to get those ships to pick up the people, and they picked up something like 18 of them. So that left 5 more in the water, and 860 came back that morning and landed, and Paul and I were the next team to go out on 990 on the 130 that was to take 860's place. And we were going to be the on-scene commander as well, which meant that all the Navy plane and the Taiwanese plane and other planes that were in the area would report into ARC to 990 every 45 minutes, something like that, and tell us, what they found, and we would tell them what search area to go to. And we launched it around 9 o'clock in the morning, and we got out there about an hour later, and we were actually right. You could look out the window. In a C-130, the way the windows are configured, actually there were scanning windows back a ways, and I think Paul was in one of the regular scanning windows, and most everybody else was in a scanning window, and then there's these littler windows that are down by the pilot's feet, and so because everybody, all the volunteers, we wanted to get them in a scanning window so they could see, and everybody would be on interphone, so that if you saw something, you could say something. You could say, "Oh, you see that at 11 o'clock," or something like that. If you saw a raft, or if you thought you saw a person, and the engineer would punch out a smoke, if that was the case. And but I laid down next to the pilot's feet, on the left side of his feet, so I could look out those little windows down by his feet. And as I was doing that, it was terrible weather. We were flying at like 500 feet initially, and when I would look out the window, all I could see is just like clouds and mist and rain, and it just wasn't good weather at all, and the plane was sort of bouncing around, and after a while I was not feeling all that well, so I got up and I announced to the pilot that I was going to go back and sit down by the troop seats near the ramp of the plane, and I did that. Now the plane 990 that day I sat behind, they had a 10,000 gallon fuel tank with extra fuel in case you were going to have to stay longer on a mission or something. And so I sat on the troop seat behind that, and I wasn't strapped in or anything, but I actually I would look out the little windows in the jump doors, and I could see better than I could see when I was up front and lying next to the pilot's feet. And then I stayed on interphone, and the pilot at that time, and one of the extra crew members was the safety officer, Captain Hover, and he was on the plane as well, and he and Captain Gray were talking about that we weren't seeing anything because of the bad weather and all, and so but I mean, we could see the ship, we could see the lumber car, we could see the telephone pole sized logs and all that, and in any event, and they started talking that we were at 500 feet, so maybe we should take it down to 300 feet, which is the lowest altitude you want to take a 130 on a search mission like that. So they talked about it, and they did, and then I remember them talking about maybe taking it down to 150 feet. So they decided, they took it down to 150 feet, and then we were flying at that level for probably 5 or 10 minutes. And then, if you've ever been in a tall skyscraper and gotten in an elevator and it starts to drop, I mean, you can feel it. Well, all of a sudden I had that feeling, and I thought, what the hell? And that's when the plane hit. So I don't know, and according to the accident report, it says we hit wings level, and I thought that possibly it was maybe turning and that the wing got ripped off, but the accident report, they concluded that it probably hit wings level. Anyway, when it hit, I was thrown into that fuel tank, 10,000 gallon fuel tank, and I remember blood coming down over my right eye and everything. And then it started. The plane started to break up, and it started to get pretty noisy from all that. And I started to scream as loud as I possibly could, and I couldn't hear myself scream over the sounds of the plane breaking up. And anyway, in that first jar, when I hit my head, my body sort of spun around, and the ramp was like right back there, I was right next to the ramp, and the ramp started to separate from the plane, and I could see the ocean underneath. And anyway, then we hit one more time, and my body spun around the opposite way, so I was looking towards the front of the plane, and that's when the 10,000 gallon fuel tank was separating from the wall, and the pipes and all, and I could see all the gas coming out. And then the gas caught fire, and the fire came right up towards my face, and I believe that's what caused the initial burns I had. And, I've got some pictures that Craig Newman took in the hospital. One minute, I'll have in just a minute, let me see. That's what I looked like about a week it happened.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like Bill Davidson told me, he said, Jim, he says, you look like a marshmallow that had been dropped in the campfire.
You do?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Oh, wow, that one is.
Yeah.
Wow.
But after about a year, it got better. But the doctor would take me down to the operating room every other day, and he would debride the scabs off my face. But as he told me, he says he had to be very careful to not debride things that might regenerate. He had to be careful to distinguish between that, and he did a really good job. I see dermatologists all the time, and they said, "Oh, he did a great job." You know?
Yeah, because you look fine.
Yeah.
I do. I would not have known you would not.
Yeah. Oh, no.
So at that point, I don't remember hardly anything after that, except waking up in the water. And I thought I was waking up in the barracks back at the Philippines at Clark, and then I found myself. I was face down in the water, and I was kind of in this position, and my hands were down around the laces of my boots, and I thought maybe I was trying to untie my boots, and but we wore what they call LPUs, underarm life preservers, that were, that could inflate. They had little CO2 cartridges to inflate them, and you have to really make a positive effort. The doctor thought I probably just did it sort of instinctively, but mine were inflated, and my face down in the water like that, I thought, I got to the surface of the water, my head broke the surface of the water, and I took a deep breath, and it was there had been fire on the water, black smoke, and but anyway, then I tried to think, what should I be doing, and I realized, and then I remembered that we were flying, and that the plane crashed, so I was sort of assessing what had happened, and I was trying to feel my body and my arms and legs and stuff, and see if I could move them and things, just to see if I felt there was anything broken, and I didn't feel anything broken. But as I started to look around, and I was looking for people, to see if I could see anybody else that might be there, and I didn't see anybody, but I did see the tires from the airplane just floating just below the surface, and there was stuff from the bins overhead that we used to keep extra parachutes and stuff like that in, and that was kind of floating underneath the surface of the water. And then there was a wing that had sheared off, it was just sticking out, where it was attached to the plane, was sticking out of the water.
So the plane never actually blew up? Yeah.
No, it didn't blow up, it crashed. It broke up. And,
but it must have burned.
Yes.
From the...
Yeah, and there were ships in the area that saw the black smoke.
It was a C-130 going over.
Yeah, that's what I understand. Yeah, and they thought they saw the
Yeah.
the black smoke and the Navy
Yeah.
P3. So I was just floating there, and I didn't, and I'm the kind of guy who can go into one of these ponds or something like that, and I'm always wondering what the hell is underneath me, is there, what's going on? And out there, I figured, actually, it turns out, in retrospect, we were about 100 miles from shore, from south of Taiwan, or Okinawa, and the water was actually about a mile or so deep at that point. And so I was looking in the water saying, what am I going to see here, sharks or, what kind of critters are around here? But as I was looking around, after a while, after a few minutes, I heard plane engines, and I looked up towards the sky, and there was that P-3 Orion, and it was coming directly for me. And as it flew over, I could actually see the face of the co-pilot,
Wow.
and they rocked their wings as they went over me. So I thought, that's good.
Yeah, they saw you.
Yeah, they saw me, so I figured I knew they'd seen me. And then that plane disappeared, and then probably a quarter of an hour later, one of our planes, I could see 130 came over, and then they turned down, and I saw the ramp going down. Then we generally carried a 20-man life raft in the back of the plane, and so I saw the 20-man life raft out over as the thing was open, and they dropped it, and the plane must have been a couple of miles away from me. I don't even remember seeing the 20-man life raft hit the water, but I thought, I'd already been trying to see if I could move or do anything like that in the water just to test my body, and I thought, I'm not swimming to that, wherever it landed, that must be our guys, all right, so, but anyway, so there was that, and
I'm surprised your eyes weren't burned so bad that you could see.
well, I could see okay, but what happened was my neck was swelling up, and my eyes would swell up too. So in order for me to see properly after a while, especially when I was picked up on the ship, I had to lift my own eyelid and stuff. But after a while, I was looking in a particular direction, and I saw a ship sort of coming out of the mist. It seemed like it was, but then it turned back into the mist, and then after a while, another ship came, and it was heading right for me, so that was good news. And there were a bunch of crew members on the bow of the ship pointing in my direction. The ship came closer and closer, but it was kind of zigging and everything, and I knew it was trying to get to me. And then as the ship started to pass me, as the bow started to pass, one of the crew members on board had a life preserver, and he threw it in my direction, and it was attached to a rope, and it hit the water, and it was so far away from me, there was no way I was going to get to it. So he pulled it back in as quick as he could, and then he threw it again, and once again, there was no hope for me grabbing hold of it. And I saw that on the side of the ship, they had actually dropped a netted rope. So I thought, if I can get hold of that thing. So he threw it one more time, and I was able to get it, and I just hung on for dear life. And as the ship kept going by, I was pulled into the side of the ship, and when I got to the side of the ship where the knotted rope had been dragged down, I could hook one arm in, and then I let go of the life preserver and hooked my other arm in, and then they pulled me up and over the side, so I was finally on board ship. And because it was a Japanese freighter, they had in Japan, I'd been in, sometimes I was TDY to Tachikawa or somewhere, and in Japan, like in the hotels and stuff, they love these deep tubs, like the old-fashioned tubs you had when you were growing up and stuff. And they had and on this ship there was a big deep tub, and even though the water in the South China Sea that day wasn't really, really cold or anything like that, you can get hypothermia in 80-degree water just because, you know, you're 98.6 degrees and your temperature is going to drop and drop, and I knew my temperature, I knew that it had dropped even though the water wasn't really cold, but they put me in this tub and the water was warm in the tub, and I thought, oh, this is great. You know, flight suit and all, I was just sitting in there and getting warmer by the minute, so that helped. And then the captain of the ship was the only guy on the ship. He could speak English, and he came up to me and I asked him. I said, "Was there anybody else that he saw?" And he said, "No, he didn't see anybody else." But he said he saw the plane crash. He said he saw the smoke. He said the plane flew over his boat, and then he saw the black smoke from the impact. And so then they took me out of the tub and they put me in like a crew quarters where there was a bed and a mattress, and they put me on that, and there were some pillows there, and I just lay there. And after a while, a guy came in through the door, and he had a big yellow can, and I recognized what that yellow can was. The yellow can, that's the kind of thing we would drop to somebody. That's where you put a rescue radio in it. And I thought, oh, there's going to be a rescue radio. And sure enough, the guy opened up the can, and he pulled out a PRC-10 rescue radio. And it's one of these radios that it's a survival radio. You activate it by pulling out the antenna. And so he handed me the radio, and I pulled out the antenna. And I started to talk, and I was talking to a crew member, obviously flying above the ship.
On the C-130.
On the C-130.
Yeah.
And we had a navigator who could speak fluent Japanese. And I don't remember his name now, but he could. And he said, "So you finally got the radio?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, we dropped one can, and it didn't hit the ship. Then we tried another one, and that didn't hit the ship. And the last one got hung up on the antenna. There was a radio antenna on the ship, and they sent a guy up, and he got it down. And he opened it up on the deck of the ship and started talking. And he said the guy was so into talking to an American aircrew member who could speak Japanese, he had to order him to give it to the guy they picked up. So anyway. So I said, yeah, well, you know, he packed it all back up again, and then he opened it up like it was a big Christmas present, and it was. So anyway, I told them who I was and everything, and they asked me how I was, and I said, I think I'm okay. I said, I think my face was burned, but I think I'm okay now. I don't think I broke anything. But they said, okay, well, they told me to give the radio to the captain, and they talked to the captain, and the captain was going to head towards the tip of Okinawa, and it would take him 10-12 hours to get there. So then they told me that to have they talked to the captain, because the captain would be able to go back to his regular ship's radio, and they told him how to get in touch with the rescue radio in Okinawa. And Bill Davidson was on that night. At the reunion I went to in 1999, my wife and I had dinner with Bill Davidson and his wife, so that was really neat.
Yeah.
And Bill had worked hard with me that, anyway, the captain took the radio, and then he went back, I think, to continue to communicate and to get better radio communication through his ship-to-shore radio, and talked to Bill Davidson, and I just lay there. And after a while, I woke up, and I couldn't breathe. It was like, that kind of thing. So that was very concerning to me, and I could feel my neck was just as big as my head. It had swollen up. I probably swallowed a lot of that stuff, so it wasn't good. And I had a feeling that if I can't breathe anymore, what am I going to do? So I pounded on the wall, and there were some crew members playing cards on the other side of the room, and they came over, and I kind of wheezed out, "Get the captain." So the captain came in, and I explained. I said, "I can't breathe. And so what he did is he went back and he talked to Bill Davidson, and he passed on that I was unable to breathe and all, and the captain took me back where his radio was, and Bill Davidson and I were able to communicate somewhat, and Bill, talking to myself and the captain, asked, he said, "Jim, you know what a cricothyroidotomy is?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I did it on goats a couple of times."
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a way, if you have a really sharp jackknife and it's clean, you can feel your cricoid arch here. And it's a space, and if you have a sharp, like a jackknife, you can slip it in there. And then if you have the bottom part of a pen that has a hole in each side, that you can slip that, and you have an airway. Anyway, the captain went and got himself a sharp knife and some alcohol and a mirror and some medical tubing. So the idea was that if things got real bad, I was going to try a self-administered cricothyroidotomy. And anyway, the captain wasn't too thrilled about that. I wasn't too thrilled about that idea, and Bill was just trying to help talk me through it, So we soaked up a rag with some of that alcohol, and we ran it around my neck and everything, and then cleaned off the knife as best we could, and I felt where it would probably have to go if it got that bad. But at that point, I was still alive, and I thought, I'm not going to do this to myself. I'll bleed out on this deck if I do that. So anyway, then I could hear behind Bill, his commander came in and asked him what was happening, and Bill explained, and the commander said, "To do that, sir," and he says, "I don't have the authority. It's all up to the guy on the ship. And if he can't," he says, "all I'm trying to do is help him if he wants to do it himself."
Yeah.
And which makes sense. Anyway, that was everybody's way out of it. So I never did do it, but it was a possibility, and I thought, oh God, I hope I can get better. Anyway, so the captain took me back into where I was, and I went back and lay down on the bed, and just lay there and lay there. And Bill, before I'd gone back, Bill told me that they had just recently gotten some jollies into the base over there in Okinawa. It was Kadena or somewhere like that. And he says, "We're going to launch a helicopter to get you off the ship, to get you back, so we can get you into a hospital as quick as we can." And I thought, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
So I went back and lay down, and then I must have drifted off. And after a while, I came to again, or woke up, and I could breathe. I could breathe so much better. And I saw that I had actually coughed up a whole bunch of black stuff on the pillow next to me, so that probably helped.
Yeah.
And I so that was great. And then after a while, I could hear helicopter blades over the ship, and a couple of crew members got me and picked me up and dragged me through. On a ship, there's always, you have to step through doors and stuff. Well, my shins were pretty well bashed up by the time they got me on deck. But anyway, hi there, doggy. There was an H-3 helicopter over, and a PJ came down. It was Billy Ray Smith. Did you ever know who he was?
I know.
Yeah, he was from Mississippi, and he had this low Southern drawl. And I could hear him say Phelps, and I said, "Is that Billy Ray?" And he said, "Yeah." He says, we're going to go up the Jungle Penetrator, So the Jungle Penetrator was actually, it looked like a little bomb, and you could fold 3 seats down, and it had straps so you could wrap it around yourself or another person and everything. And so we went up to the helicopter, went up the hoist in there, and there was a flight surgeon on the helicopter. And all he did is just sit there and kind of look me over and ask me a few questions, and I talked to him, and he thought things were going well. So we were going to go to Camp Cooey Army Hospital in the bottom of Okinawa, or the tip of Okinawa. So, but we had to air refuel on the way back. They'd had to air refuel just to get out there, and then they air refuel on the way back, which is that's a risky process too. The H-3 helicopter flies behind and below the left wing of a 130, and the helicopter blades usually come within about 10 feet of the tail of the 130. And I could see this I could see out the side window, and that was happening, and it's always a little nerve-wracking, even when you're well. But anyway, so it happened that way, and we got it. We were on our way in, and eventually landed, and Bill Davidson was right there at the hospital to see me. Yeah, so that was great. And then they cut my flight suit off me and everything. And checked me out a little bit more, and everything seemed to be well. And I'd asked, I said, what about the rest of the crew on board that were on the plane and everything? And they said, well, we think they're all gone. So that was.
They searched for 2 days.
Yeah.
Wow. The P3s and the C-130s were out there for 2 days.
Wow. Oh, that's good. Anyway, so I stayed the night at that hospital, and then the next day they took me back to Clark, and I was put at the Clark Hospital. And
because they didn't have to look for the area of the accident, because the one going over knew where it was.
Yeah.
They had seen you go in.
Yeah, and they had.
So there was no search other than to search for survivors.
Right.
But they didn't have to locate an area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just figure when the plane broke up and everything, it must have filled with water, and then everybody was probably pretty well strapped in if they could be, and they'd have drowned, that kind of thing.
Or the fire would have gotten.
Yeah, right. But
Was it any part of the plane ever
Yeah, I was gonna say.
brought back?
no, I don't think there was. I think the only part of the plane that anybody could recognize would have been that wing that was sticking out of the water.
Yeah.
I saw that, and a couple of tires that were there. But no, I don't think
Everything else sank.
Yeah, I don't think they ever sent a ship over to see, to see if they could find it it would have been about a mile down anyway, so I don't know.
Well,
Anyway, the,
submarines could have went down.
yeah, maybe if they could have done something like that, but we know the latitude and longitude with a certain amount of precision. In fact, it's in those, it's in the accident report. And as I say, my goal is someday when I pass on, they'll cremate me and they'll take some of my ashes, and someone will go over the South China Sea and drop it around that place. That's what I would like.
If that's your dream, you tell somebody.
I will. Oh yeah. In September, I go down to a pararescue reunion in San Antonio, and I'm going to talk to someone on active duty and see how I get that set up so it would work that way.
So you may be able to contact whoever's taking care of that, but the Neptune Society does a lot of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if they do it though overseas like that.
But they may know
They
someone
should
in
know
the
who-
military to contact.
Because they normally do it right over the Atlantic coast
Yeah.
or the Pacific coast, but they could probably get you in touch with
Mhm.
somebody over there.